All right, everyone, welcome to the Maxon booth here at NAB New York. I'm your host, Matthias, aka Major VFX, on the 3D Motion Show. For those of you who don't follow along online and this is your first time, check out 3dmotionshow.com. We're streaming pretty much every month a lineup of amazing artists. I want to give this gentleman as much time as possible. He has some really cool stuff, so let's give a big, warm welcome to Dave Weinstock.
Hey, thank you guys. So yeah, I'm Dave. I'm a freelance motion and 3D generalist. I live in the area and I also work remotely. I'm going to show you guys my reel first so you get a sense of the kind of work I'm doing, and then I'll dive into a personal project I recently completed and we'll break down some of the scenes I did there. So here's my reel. Alright, so there was my reel. Most of the 3D in that was Redshift and C4D. And you'll see some clips in there of some Halo shorts that I did recently. I'm going to show you guys that, and then we'll break down some of the scenes. So here's the short. Hopefully it gets you in the Halloween spirit. Alright, so that was the short. It's all Cinema 4D and Redshift. It's based on Halo. My buddy Alex helped me out with the modeling of the environment. So I'm just going to dive right into some of the shots I did. The first shot we're going to go over is the helmet fracture scene where it first reveals the flood monster, which is basically like a thing-like parasite, if you guys have ever seen that film. So let's kill the audio because that's quite gross. Alright, click play. So there's a lot going on here. If we just slow it down a little bit, like the helmet itself, you can kind of see here it's moving upwards and then it's shattering, and that causes some problems with the Voronoi. So there's a few different steps you have to do to get this kind of look. And the first thing I did is I ripped the helmet out of this render scene and then just did everything at world 0 like this here. So this is what the actual simulation looks like. So you'll see there's 3 balls moving through there. These are collider objects. I've got a pose morph on my head here and the helmet to move it upwards. So boom. So I'm going to do a new scene. And I'm just going to break down how I did this effect. So let's get rid of all these tags. Center this guy up. Cool. Alright, so here's our helmet. First thing we need to do is we need to add a pose morph tag. And that would be under your rigging tags here. Pose morph right there. Alright, and then under mixing, we need to do points because that's what's going to be animating. So we put the points tag on there, or we click points, and we have a base pose, which will just be the helmet by itself, unaffected. And then we'll have pose 0, and this is where the animation happens. It's going to move the helmet apart. So the first thing you got to do is you got to go to points mode. We'll do our live selection tool, and I'll make this a little bigger. I'm going to uncheck visible only, so everything under the cursor is going to be selected, even things on the back side of the helmet. And then we'll do some soft selection so it's not really jagged when you move this around. So let's select. I'm going to move this up, rotate it a little bit. Let's do the bottom, down, and this is like the helmet flexing before it breaks, because maybe it's made of plastics and some metals, so it kind of has like a cool little animation to it. So then, okay, we're going to go over in the mode here, and we're going to switch to animate mode. And basically, it's going to give you this strength slider here. And this is what I'm animating. So the first frame, obviously, it's going to be unaffected. And then let's say it'll happen pretty quick. So we'll do by frame 12, we'll do 100%. And then I kind of just went through here and I added like random keyframes to kind of give it like a little bit of stutteriness, like it's flexing under the tension of this gross thing head, you know, that's popping out. So let's see how this looks. It might look a little weird here. That's good enough. So yeah, on the final one, obviously I did a decent amount of finesse, but that'll do for now. So the next part of this is we need to shatter the visor, right? So the visor, in order to select it, you just click UF, and that's going to do your fill selection tool. So we're going to select the visor here, and then you can either click UP, that splits it out, or you can right-click and do split. So we've got our visor here. Let's name this so we don't get confused, and then we'll just call this the helmet cage object, and that'll come back into play in a little bit. Whatever object. Okay. So if we put a Voronoi fracture into this scene, which is how we would fracture an object in C4D, put it under there, okay. So let's turn off the cage objects. Okay, so you see we're getting kind of like a lame fracture here. So that would be under the sources here. This is how you fracture your object. So I'm going to delete that out. I'm going to bring in my own object to fracture this to give it more of like a glass window shatter look. So we're going to put a disk in here. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. Let's change this to +Z. Maybe drag it up here. Move it back. Scale it down. Okay, let's click NB. That's how you do your line mode. N pretty much is all the viewport modes. Very helpful shortcut to know. So if we go back to our Voronoi and then we put this in the source, it's gonna look like nothing's gonna happen. But if you keep zooming this down, you'll start to see it's cutting our object. Now if we add even more disk segments in here, look at that. We're getting more of like a glass-like shatter here. And then what I also like to do is I add a displacer object, put that into the disk. Then under shading, let's add a noise. So yeah, now you get more of like an organic shatter pattern here. I'm probably going to change that up here under object. Let's do direction planar, and then we'll do +Y or -Y. Yeah. So see, it gets a little bit more organic. And then let's go back actually to shading and global scale here. This is going to change how our displacer is displacing. You see, this is what it looks like, which is complete junk geometry. But it is it's cutting our visor in a kind of a cool, unique way. And then you can save that. We can turn that off there. All right, so we've got our Voronoi fracture here, but if we play this, it's shifting, right? And you don't want it to shift when you're doing dynamics on it. So what you need to do is you need to right-click here, and we got to do current state to object right here. And then I'm going to just turn this off. I like to save all my stuff in case you have to go back a step, because it just makes things easier instead of saving out versions of projects, I think. So I'll just do I'll call this archive. So our Voronoi's here. What we're going to do with this, though, is if you middle-click the parent null, it'll select all your objects. And I'm just going to collapse this into a single object. So now I got just a single object here. It's not animated or anything. But if we go back and we look at our cage object here, we still have the full intact helmet. So if I come in here and I do a mesh deformer, and I'm going to put that on our let's rename this to visor fractured. And in the mesh object here, you see it's looking for a cage object. So that's why I saved this. Drag it in there. And then under advanced, do surface area. Initialize, and see it's telling you that it's working here. And then it puts these two little tags on here. That's basically removing it from the render engine. We don't care about that, so I'm just going to delete them. We can we'll keep this on actually. Now if you click play, everything's moving together. It's static object, right? So it's going to shatter correctly if we add in dynamics. So let's do our normal fracture object. Let's put that in there. And then if we want this to actually break open, we need to go under mode here and set this to explode segments. Now this is going to be treated as individual objects. So if I right click here and I put a rigid body tag on here, it's going to start to fall apart. You can see it's individual objects. That's not what we want though. So I'm going to set this trigger down here on the dynamics body tag to on collision. So now only when something acts upon this, it's going to break a collision object. So let's take actually the cage out of our archive. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the visor from this. Just delete. Okay, and now we have our fracture object. Oh, wait, one sec. We have to duplicate, go back. Okay, cool. Duplicate it, turn it off. This object here will be our render object. Call it just render. Let's go back to polygon mode, delete. Now we got it. Okay. So we have a full intact helmet now. We've got the outer helmet, we've got the inner shattered helmet. So if we click play, it should be working. Oh, it just exploded. There we go. So it's all stretching exactly how we want it. So if I go back to this, put that in there. All right, so we have our fracture. Now we need something to bust this thing open. So I'm going to put a sphere in the scene. This is what I ended up doing for the final one. I'm going to scale this down a little bit. Let's bring it all the way up. Okay, I'm even smaller. Yeah. All right, so we're going to put a collider tag on this under bullet tags. Just add a collider body. Cool. And now I'm going to animate this moving through the visor. So that would be coordinates. Let's move it down a little bit. Maybe at the, yeah, right there. And we'll shoot it out. It's still way too big. I'll make that go a little smaller. So let's see, maybe 4. Yeah, I think that'll work. Now let's play. It's a little bit slow, but it's working. So this is pretty much how I did the effects here. I had 3 of them. So one going from the right to the left, and then some on the lower face. And then what I ended up doing with the actual head, if we go to this scene, here he is. Let's bring him in. So here's the face, and it's going to look really wonky because basically what I'm doing is I am squishing the head in so it fits in the helmet, and then with a pose morph tag like we did on the outer helmet, I'm just animating these pose morphs. So the final thing you can do on this scene, if you really want to sell it, is these are just like single planes right now. So what you can end up doing to get some thickness to these is you just put a cloth object in here and you turn off subdivisions. Just give it like a really small thickness, and then put in the fracture, and it will reset. So what you want to do with this is you want to cache your object first. So if you bake this out, shouldn't take too long. But then the cloth object will work. It'll give you some thickness to your little glass shards there. So if we play, let's do this. Yep. Now it comes off. We do maybe NA. Yeah. So that's how I did the helmet fracture. The next scene I want to show you guys is the arm scene where the tentacles are coming out of the arm. So that was actually done in Houdini. This was in Vellum. And my friend Seiji Anderson set up a nice little goop line setup on this. But when we had made this, it was Cinema 4D R25, I think, had just come out. So we didn't have the new cloth tools or anything like that. So I kind of went back and tried to remake this in a way that could utilize the new tools that we just got. So if we look here, this is kind of what I came up with. Just going to give it a second to load here. So yeah, pretty gross. The rig on this, basically, there's no keyframes. If we take a look here, let's turn everything on right here. So it's a simple IK rig for the arm. And then we have the two tentacles here. And then all the animation, you'll see how it's kind of like moving around like he's struggling. It's all vibrate tags, basically, and I'm just doing a position and rotation. And for anyone who doesn't know, vibrate tag is under animation tags. and it's just going to add noise to your animation. So this is kind of what I ended up doing just for the animation. For the cloth ripping, it was actually almost base settings on this, and it worked really well. So let's turn off the rig so we can see what we're doing. Okay, I'm going to remove the cloth stuff from here. And now if you play, nothing's happening, right? Delete the goop too. We don't need that. Okay, so this is what we got as our base animation, right? Now we got to add some cloth tags to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move this out of here. We don't need this for now. Let's go under, right-click, simulation tags, cloth. All right, cool. And if we just click play on this, it's just going to go off into space, right? So it's not, we need colliders on this. So obviously the most obvious solution here is the arm and the glove. Probably need colliders on it. So if we go back to simulation, let's do collider. Yep, this little coat hanger here. And then I'm going to control drag that up onto the glove. Let's play. So that's closer, right? But it's not ripping, and the sleeve is falling down the arm, which is bad. So if we click on our arm here and we go to point mode, you'll see I already have it selected, but basically I'm doing a loop selection on the very last row of points. UL is how to do loop selections. So you select your loop here, and then you go back into your cloth tag under dresser, and you just do set fixed points right here. So if you click set, it'll turn purple, and that basically means that this thing is not going to move in the simulation. It's kind of like holding it in place. So now if we play, it's working mostly. It's just not ripping, right? So if we, let's see here, my keyframes. So if we go back to the 0 here, frame 0, let's add some tearing to this. So if we go into the new surface tag that was added in R23, there's this little checkbox here, clear cloth tearing. So let's click on that. Now let's click play. So now that looks pretty good. I mean, I would probably just use that and I would call it done, especially if you're trying to do an entire short film. You don't want to get bogged down on a single shot because you'll never finish it. But if we look at the actual rip again, there's like this cloth in the center that didn't get ripped. So I kind of want to match that. And in order to match that, what you can do is you can go into your jacket now, go back to frame 0, and you can actually draw on a map for the tear object to utilize. So if we go over here to live selection, let's select the arm here. I'm doing the same exact selection you guys just saw, but I'll just do it again. All right. So now we go up to select, store selection, and what this is going to do, it's going to give us a new tag here. I'm going to call it arm rip. All right, cool. So now if we go back to our cloth tag here, we got to go under the tear past little chevron here. You click that down, that's where your map goes. So we'll drag that in there. And then you need to up this tear past value to something pretty high in order for it to actually respect the map you put in. So I'll do 275. So yeah, that's pretty close. Maybe a little bit less actually, because this one didn't rip as much. So maybe like 250. Let's see what that looks like. It's similar. It ripped a little bit more, but you know, I like it better when it ripped all the way open. So I'm just gonna do 175. Let's click play on that. How's that look? Yeah, that looks really cool. Yeah, I'm gonna keep that one. All right, so I'm gonna bake this now. Let's just cache it. Let's calculate cache. Let me see real quick. If you do Control D, you can go into your simulation settings, and you can kind of set higher collision iterations, passes, and that sort of stuff. If you're getting like collision with your geo on your cloth, this is where you would try to fix that. So I already have some higher passes here, but I just wanted to double check and make sure that was up before we calculate. And it will take longer for your simulation to simulate if you up those settings. But this is really fast as is. So there we go. There it's simulated. So now what we got to do is we got to add in the little goop lines in between the arm there. So how I ended up solving this in Cinema was I basically built a cloner, Shift-C, cloner, and then I built a null object. I'm gonna clone this null object onto this arm. So if we go back into the cloner and we go to mode, let's do object, and then we'll drag in the arm into here. All right, let's click play. And you can kind of see here, there's just like 1 or 2 points. So let's up this to like 2,000, like a lot. All right, now you can see more. And what I also like to do is under the object tab here, under shape, if you set this to, I don't know, circle, and a much lower value, you can kind of see more what you're doing. All right, so we don't want it everywhere, because this is going to be sampling like exactly where the goop line is going to go. So I'm going to draw another map on the arm here, which is already selected. But when you're going back into polygon mode and you have an object that's already skinned and rigged, it's going to go back to its default pose. So what I like to do is I like to go back to object mode, and then like near the end of the animation here, we'll be able to see. Okay, so I can see exactly where I'm going to want these lines to show up here. So I'm going to right click and let's see, current state to object. Okay, cool. So now if I select on here, you see it's the end pose. So it's easier for me to understand what's going to happen. So I'm going to select here. There's some of there. That looks cool. All right, cool. So if I go to store selection again, it's going to give me a new tag, and I'll just call this goop. And if we go back to our cloner, well, first we actually have to take this tag, since this is a separate piece of geometry, and since it's the same exact piece of geometry, we just put it back onto our animated object, and I can just delete that now. So if I go to the cloner, I'm going to drag that new goop selection onto here, and now it's only in these areas. So the final C4D step, at least on this, would be to add a tracer object to your scene. And I'll show you what this looks like rendered in just a second. Let's drag the cloner into the trace link down here. Cool. And if we click play, what's going to happen is it's just going to trace where these objects are, and that's not really very goop-like. So under tracing mode, if you just do connect all objects, there we go. That looks pretty gross. So yeah, that's working. And if we go over here, Redshift, let's launch the render view. All right, cool. So this is what it looks like rendered. So we'll show up in the viewport here. Oh, let me get this a little bigger. So you'll see nothing is rendering here, right? There's no lines. So what we need to do is on the tracer object, let's add a render tag rs object. Now it kind of understands what you want to do. It's a curve, right? So under mode, let's set that to cylinders, and it's going to be absolutely gigantic. Let's make it smaller in the thickness, maybe even smaller. Let's do that. Now this little scale here, the way the tracer object works, it's not like a bunch of little splines, it's just one long spline. So if we go in here in the scale and we just kind of like, you know, really mess with this curve, it's going to give you different varying lengths of lines. So let's put our shader on here. All right, cool. So if we get in a little close here, you can kind of see it's kind of showing up here between the two tentacles. Cool. So let's turn this off for now. There's still one more thing we need to add to this to finish it off, and that's basically where these lines are connecting. There needs to be like a layer of goop, and if we go back and look at the actual one, Seiji had set up like right down here, this little jello looking stuff. So I'm going to set that up real quick. If we go to the arm geo again, that tag we used, this one, is in the perfect locations for the lines. So if I split this out and I do right click, Let's see, splits. Now we got ourselves our goop. I'm going to bring it down here. But the problem is, if you click play on this, it's not animated. So what we can do is the same thing we did on the helmet, which is use a mesh deformer on it. So if I turn off the skin on the main arm, it'll put it back into the same exact position as the split object. And then on the goop, we just add that mesh deformer again. And then under cages, right, arm, surface area, initialize. And then it's going to give us these 2 tags. Get rid of that. And let's put this on I'm putting the goop shader on the actual arm group now so we can see what's going on. So now we have to turn back on the skin. All right, cool. So it's almost there. Let's add a little bit of thickness to it, like I always like to do with this cloth surface. So we got that guy in there. Let's add the goop under there. And what I don't like about the cloth surface is the subdivision keeps the object squared off. It doesn't seem to smooth it. So I'm going to get rid of that and then just add a little bit of bulge there. And then in between these two, I'm going to put a subdivision surface. If you alt-click, it's automatically going to put it on your whatever is selected. So if I alt-click on that, see how it kind of like rounds it out? It looks more organic. So now, if I go back to the cloth surface, the bulging here, if you click this option, it almost looks a little bit like watery surface tension. It's too extruded right now, but if you bring it in, I think it kind of gives it a nice look. So yeah, there we go. Now let's launch the render view. Yeah, and it looks pretty gross. So the actual shader that's doing this is very simple. It's just a RS standard shader. It's a new that just came out with Redshift 2.5, I believe, or 3.5. So this is basically just using a transmission with the weight all the way up. Then I got a little bit of noise piped in to break up the reflection a little bit around the goop. And then under here, under transmission color, you can kind of change the look of it really quickly. So if you wanted something that looked maybe more Ghostbustery, we could just do something like this. Let's see if it goes through. Come on now. Maybe now it'll go through. Let's refresh. There we go. Okay. So now we got some Ghostbusters looking stuff. Maybe let's change the light to green too. Let's see how that looks like. Yeah, so now we got some green slime, maybe a little less gross, more Halloween-esque. So yeah, that's pretty much how I reset up the arm. I think it turned out pretty good with the cloth dynamics. If you're doing, a horror short film or something like that, there's a lot you can do with the C4D's new systems. So I'm gonna move on to the thermal shader I set up recently. Oh, Chivalry 2 is available. Wow, that's a great game. All right, so if I go to Halo thermal shader, all right, so this is the thermal shot. Technically, it's not a part of the short, but I did it after to kind of showcase my assets, and I think it came out nice. It looks kind of, thermal shadery. And the first thing I did with this is I looked at reference, like a lot of reference for what a thermal shader is, right? So I got some FLIR imagery here, and then I got some stuff from Halo Landfall, which is kind of what I was riffing off here. It's a short advertisement by Neil Blomkamp and Peter Jackson in like 2008, 2007. They have all these cool imagery of like the same characters that I'm using running through like, environments and stuff like that. And then I grabbed some modern images of some thermal stuff that kind of informs you like what's going on here. So if we open that up in, okay, so yeah, here's my project in C4D. You can see this is a Mixamo rig that I linked this guy up to. I actually did use Mixamo for my characters, and then I kind of re-weight painted everything, and then brought it into C4D and got the character object all set up. So it was a relatively simple process. It took a long time to do the weight painting, but it's not bad. And if we look here, you know, his gun and all that stuff is all linked up. So if we launch the render view, let me just make sure this one's not launched anymore. Might take a little bit. There we go. All right, so here is the base render for the thermal shader, right? It looks okay here. It's a little dark, but the actual materials on here is I took my materials from the ODST that I had rendered for the full Redshift short, and then I just went in and I pretty much inverted them if there was a diffuse map, and if not, I just added a curvature to it. So if we look at, this was a good one to look at. Here's the actual breakdown. It's dead simple. I got my my actual diffuse map here for, and this is for the jacket. So if we look at the actual albedo or diffuse of the jacket, I just saw it right here. There's a lot of detail in here for free, pretty much. So what I ended up doing is I just inverted it with a color invert node, and then piped it into a ramp, and I kind of stopped it down to like 50% here on the white value. And then for the curvature map, we got a relatively high value of like 4, and then I'm piping that also into a ramp. And that's just in a regular Redshift material, and you get kind of this thermal look. But if we look here at the actual AOV, like a lot of this is happening in After Effects, the actual look. So what I ended up rendering out, very simple, just the beauty and a crypto mat that's set to object name. So this is going to give you a mat ID for like each individual object, like the helmet, the jacket, the glove, you know, etc. So let's launch. Let's stop Redshift, and then let's launch the comp. Okay, we don't need that stuff. All right, cool. So here was the actual comp setup. It's only like 8 layers, very simple. So let me look through here. Let's start to rebuild it. So here are my 2 passes up here. My beauty pass, which looks like this, and then I got my crypto mat, which looks like nothing. So what you have to do is you have to add the crypto effect to this, which if you just look up crypto mat, now we have our mat IDs, right? So I can go in here and I can just start selecting stuff. I think, let's see, let me maybe add this in there. And then over here under output, let's set this to mat only. And then what I like to do, you can do this any way you want, but I like to use an adjustment layer here. And then this is kind of what I'm going to mat out here. So if I do a Luma mat, this adjustment layer is only going to affect the armor layer here. So you have a lot of control here. You can mat out whatever you want, basically. And what I ended up building was essentially this. So you see I have like the base background here, clothing, pants, armor, etc. So the next step that I did on this basically is I took my built beauty pass and I brought it in a new comp, and then I duplicated it, and then adding, like, it needs a little bit more to it to look kind of futuristic-y, so I did a find edges effect, and I inverted it, and now I got this kind of like cool looking thing, right? So if I add that on top, you get kind of like, it just looks a little bit more defined. Like you got like this little outline around stuff, and anyone who's played Halo, it's kind of similar to the actual game's HUD. So if we add maybe a levels to this, and we clamp that too much. Maybe something like that, yeah. And then I added the UI layer, which is super simple. It's literally just, you know, text with a mosaic on top. And basically what mosaic does is it pixelates your footage, or in this case text. So it's completely indecipherable right now. So I put up to 512, 512. You can kind of see this is kind of like what a military camera would look like. You know, they've got just random GAC here and, you know, different notations. So if we go back to our pre-comp here, in the reference as well, I noticed a lot of the UI stuff has like this black around it. So I'm going to put a little bit of a backdrop on this text and then balloon it out with a min-max, which basically, if we look at this by itself, if you set this to alpha in color, it's going to balloon it out, right? And it looks junky, which is good because it's supposed to be like not that good, you know, not that high tech. So that's looking pretty good. And then you see it just adds a little something to it, just a little tiny bit. So the next step would be to build a grid. And the reason I do a grid is because I want to add like some pixel texture to it. You can of course bring in a pixel texture, but I almost always use the grid because it's a little bit more procedural. So you bring in the grid effect, whoops, grid. And then if you go over, it's kind of hard to see. Let's switch this to black. So you see like this little corner pin here. That's what controls the size of the pin, the grid. So we want it to be small because it's pixels. I'll put the border down here pretty small and then feather it a little bit. And then on blending mode, let's set it to multiply. And now you'll see we're kind of getting this cool effect on here. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Sweet. So then from there, pretty much you just add grain and all sorts of cool stuff. So let's see. Add grain, more intensity, and then final. Too much. And then maybe we can color correct it a little bit more. And then maybe add a tritone just to get some blue in there, because I feel like the white looks a little bit lame. Let's maybe something like that. Yeah, that looks cool. So I built out a few different looks on this. I did one that's closer to the game. So if we look at this here, anyone who's played Halo ODST, this is like the visor system, whatever, that would highlight everything on the map yellow. And then I did one that's kind of like the FLIR kind of look that was in my references. It came out okay. I think it probably need a little more massaging on this, but it still looks pretty good. Yeah, so I think that's about it for today. If you guys want to see some more of my work, you can visit my portfolio page, which is right here, davemotion.design. Thank you guys.
Great job. Thank you, Dave. Always a pleasure. We're going to start off with questions from the live audience. They're mesmerized. Look at that. Nailed it. Everything they wanted answered.
Mesmerized and disgusted by the arm ripping out. But
all right. Let's see. Any other questions from online? Just waiting for the refresh. I think you did well.
Damn, no questions. I guess I answered them all.
You did it. He did the thing.
All right,
awesome.
Cool.
So for those of you who are following along, and for those of you who are live here in the audience, 3D Motion Show, we stream pretty much every month from March till December, showcasing amazing artists like Dave. So make sure you go on and register. Now, the nice thing about registering is we give away thousands of dollars of prizes. Next week, we're going to be giving away an amazing Dell laptop workstation. I use one myself on our tours and everything else. It's great for Redshift and everything else, and a Sense tablet, pen tablet. So make sure to register or get your badge scanned. If you're here, get your badge scanned. Yes, get the badge scanned. So get your badge scanned here or at Adobe Max. And stay tuned. We'll be up with our very next presenter. So stay tuned. We'll be getting here started in about the next 5 minutes. Thanks again.
All right, thank you.